Hi, Lokati here. Today we're talking about our Molten Strike Trinity Strength Stacker Juggernaut. This is a build that has been inspired by One Mana Left. It is very close to the way that he is making his character, so I encourage you to look at his build guides as well. The build takes advantage of like insane scaling of Molten Strike of the Zenith, which has a fifth attack that does 1,000% extra damage and 2 additional projectiles, and ends up making the skill very, very powerful from a scaling standpoint. We're utilizing melee scaling, strength scaling, accuracy and attack speed scaling from Juggernaut, and it just ends up being a really tanky, solid clear, great bosser, great all-arounder, easy to play, one button joy, just a good all-around build. Today we're going to talk about our loadouts, we're going to talk about scaling, comparing early, mid to late mapping, crafting the sword, etc, etc. So we're going to start off with loadouts on our POB here. So we're in Act 1, Act 2, Act 6, early mapping, mid mapping, and late mapping loadouts. Act 1 and Act 2 are just here to give you an idea of about where your tree should be in Act 1 and Act 2. Like, this is every Marauder in the game. You go down to Heart of Winter, you take versatility for all of your skill requirements, and then you run down to kinetic impacts in the two-handed mastery tree here for extra damage. On Act 2, we're going to continue moving down the tree, picking up martial experience here, and going all the way across for Art of the Gladiator, just to get us to move through the campaign faster. Act 6 is where we're going to start taking some more damage nodes here. We're going to take Tribal Fury with non-ball strike, strike one additional enemy. This just massively increases our clear speed while we're getting through the campaign. We're going to take Steadfast here for melee hits, Fortify for some extra survivability, and then we're going to dip into Rage over here so that we can do more damage with Rage. Now, we are taking Blood Magic on our build, and why Blood Magic, I'm sure, is going to be the first question. Because it's easier, it's smoother, it feels better. And easy, smooth, and feels better oftentimes is much, much better than, well, it's 11% more damage if I just put Life Tap on everything and then I use an additional aura here. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to take Blood Magic because it's quality of life. Quality of life is very, very important. It also is 10% more maximum life. We still run an Eternal Blessing. We still run a Precision. So we still have a lot of good, solid stats on the build, but Blood Magic is phenomenal. It makes our life better. We have an early mapping, a mid mapping, a late mapping, which we'll talk about more. But while we're looking at our Act 1, 2, and 6 campaign situation, we have gear modifiers here. These are the goals that you're going to want to be at in each act for your character. And so, like in Act 1 and Act 2, you don't have any goals for your gear. Just get the best weapon you can find, get the most health and armor and everything you can get to. Once you're in Act 6, your gear becomes more important. In Act 6, you want to make sure that you have your res cap. And you're going to do this by getting 100% to all of your elemental resistances just around while you're looking around. You want 2,000 to armor that you're going to get from gear. You want about 400 from life you're going to get from gear. You need some int, you need some dexterity from your gear. So these are the things that you're going to be looking for from a gear standpoint. Thank you very much, Ocean. I always appreciate you. Now, in Act 6, your skills are going to be Molten Strike. Yep, making a video right now. Molten Strike. We want to run Multi-Strike with it, Trinity, and added lightning damage. In Act 6, we have not switched over to Molten Strike of the Zenith yet, so Molten Strike has a lot of value. And I do want to try to remember later on to talk about Multi-Strike as an option for some super in-game Zenith stuff. But we'll go over that towards the end of the video. So we're running Molten Strike, Multi-Strike, Trinity, and then either added lightning damage or elemental damage with attacks. If you have a sword that has lightning damage on it already, or cold damage, you don't need this. You pick up a Shiver Sting, you're golden. But if you don't, you need added lightning damage to trigger Trinity. You're going to be having some flat fire damage coming from Molten Strike. You just need an additional elemental damage to trigger Trinity so that you can have the advantage of having Trinity here. We are running Eternal Blessing and Purity of Elements. This makes us immune to all elemental ailments. Was so good. and additional elemental resistances to hit our cap. We are running Leap Slam with faster attacks and Blood Rage for frenzy charges, as well as Leech attack speed. We are running Precision as our only life reserved aura, and we are running Sniper's Mark with Mark on Hit, and Enduring Cry with Urgent Orders, cast when damage taken, Molten Shell. So these are our skills that we're going to use for leveling from Act 6 to the campaign and forward. Like I said, for your items, I've only got a sword filled in here. This is just a basic sword with added flat fire, added flat damage, increased attack speed and accuracy. If you can find something like this, phenomenal. If you can't and you can craft something like this, phenomenal. Use whatever you have access to. But this is kind of like an ideal situation for getting started here. Essences are great for trying to hit some of these mods as well. Now, once we get into early mapping, we're going to have our skills fleshed out a little bit more, and they look very similar. We have Molten Strike with elemental damage with attacks, Trinity, Return Proj, Greater Proj, and Volatility if you happen to have a 6 link. You're probably going to be using a 5 link at this point, though, and so we're going to be using these. We switch over to Molten Strike with the Zenith. We get elemental damage with attacks, we get Trinity, we get Return Proj, and we get Greater Multiple Projectiles. Now, this gives us 12 total projectiles with the Molten Strike of the Zenith attack. On our configuration, we have 76% less attack damage. This modifier is in here to simulate Magma Ball's 5th attack as the only attack, because you're getting this every 5th attack. So don't worry about it. It's there for the purpose of simulation so that we can use 5th attack as the drop down instead of using Magma Balls as the drop down. Alternatively, you could come in here and say 24% more attack damage and then use Magma Balls as the drop down. Both of them simulate the same thing. It doesn't matter what you're doing. This is just for the for utilizing POB a little bit more efficiently. We are getting 39% more projectile damage from Return Proj. The reason for that is Return Proj makes the balls bounce out and bounce back in. When they bounce back in, they do so very quickly. It's a very short distance on Molten Strike, and they will hit that target again. So essentially, with Return Proj, you're getting 61% less damage with hits and ailments while returning, or more specifically, 39% more damage for those return projectiles hitting the target that they bounced off of. And so that's why this is in here. And then again, base stats from gear in early mapping. I'm not telling you exactly what gear you should pick out in early mapping. These are rare items that you just need to have, craft, mix around, do whatever you need to. And then your goal is going to be to have an additional 100% to all resistances. So you need to start looking for some chaos res in addition to your LA res. You want about 7,000 to your armor from your gear. You want about 600 to your life from gear. You're going to need some dex. You're going to need some intelligence. So get the gear that you can get so that you have access to these stats on it. Now, you do have an early mapping sword. The early mapping sword is a tri-elemental, increased attack speed, and accuracy rating. That's ideal. If you happen to get some Essences of Woe in here and you happen to find a Hubri, you can go ahead and switch over to the early, but you're probably not going to have access to it. Just try to get the best tri-elemental attack speed, accuracy, Reaver sword that you can get your hands on. Obviously, there are some uniques in here you can use that you may have found that are also really good, solid options. You want the highest total DPS with elemental affixes on its sword that you can get your hands on. This is what you're looking for. Now, once we get into mid-mapping, we have farmed early maps. We have some currency. We are softcore trade build here. We are not a solo self-found build here. And I mean, you could be on hardcore trade too, but you have some currency. You want to start getting the items you need. The items you want to get are Crown of Eyes, Iron Fortress, Astramentus, Cyclopean Coil, and a Lethal Pride. The Lethal Pride is primarily here just to give them more strength. If you can also get some double damage or some percent life out of there, that's phenomenal. You want a Cyclopean Coil because it is total increased attributes, a lot of max life. And you also want to kind of manage your stats so that you cannot be frozen if your dexterity is higher than your intelligence. If you aren't going to run the period of elements, that can be important. And then you cannot be ignited if your strength is higher than your dexterity. That's just going to be on by default. You also get 1% increased damage per 5 your lowest attributes. So you want to make sure that your dex and your int are relatively close together just for that increased damage. Astramentis, we're going to go ahead and run. Get the best one you can get access to. Anoint Circle of Life. This is such a small thing, but it's such a huge thing. And we can thank one mana left for really focusing on making this important. Circle of Life is an affix over here that is gain 10 life per enemy hit with attacks. You're attacking 3 times a second, 4 times a second. You're throwing out 10 proges. All 10 of those proges are returning. That's 24 times 4 attacks per second. That's 100 hits per second on a single target. If there's 2 or 3 targets out there, that's 200 or 300 hits per second. This is such a tremendous recovery. Like, just run it. I don't care what else you do. Just get an Astramentis, slam Circle of Life on it, and you're going to just breeze through all of your maps. It's such a powerful anoint on this amulet. Iron Fortress Crusader Plate is giving us some increased armor, increased block chance per 50 strength. Strength bonus damage applies to, it grants increased melee physical damage per 10 strength. And all that's getting converted with our tree. This is just a really, really great chess piece. And then we're running a Crown of Eyes, Hubris Circlet. And this is what is allowing our increases to spell damage to also apply to attacks at 150% of their value, which we are converting off of our passive tree as well. It also gives us a little bit of leech, which isn't bad. And then our mid-mapping Reaver Sword is crafted with woe essences. Now we'll talk about how this works. So this might be a little too good of a sword for us to call a mid-mapping sword. What you're going to want to do is either get a sword that has a fractured increased spell damage on it, or a sword that has a fractured elemental damage or attack speed. And you want to slam woe essences into it until you have something that has elemental mods on the prefixes. Now, if you also have an attack speed mod on it, you're done. If it also has an attack speed on it, you're done. You don't have to do anything else in crafting. If it doesn't have an attack speed on it, this is where currency comes in, and you're going to want to lock prefixes and reroll speed until you get a speed. And then you're going to want to craft on your last, with your last suffix mod. It can be expensive, you can get lucky, but woe essence is how you're going to get increased spell damage onto your sword and roll until you have LE mods, and then either craft an attack speed mod or lock prefixes and reroll attack speed mods. And so this could be a little bit of an aggressive sword to call it a mid-mapping sword. We would probably want to say maybe we get something like this, and then we're crafting on attack speed instead of getting attack speed on the sword. That's probably a little bit closer to what it would look like. But this is a very important sword for you to have. Tremendous scaling to the damage of your character here, especially in your mid-mapping situation. So most of your currency should be going towards making this a really good sword, and then having like a 5-link Iron Fortress or rolling for 5 links on this sword itself. Now, once you get into late mapping, you're going to want to start getting better gloves, better boots, better rings here. We definitely want to have a really strong late mapping Reaver Sword with high rolls on your elemental affixes. Ideally, rerolled speed for a good T1 or T2 attack speed roll, and then crafting on an increased attack speed while a rare unique enemy is nearby. That ends up being a very, very strong sword for you. There's a lot of different swords you can make here that would work. Possibly a Void Forge sword would work here as a good option. I don't know what the difference is between my sword and the Void Forge. We're at 12 million DPS right here. A Void Forge is at 10 million DPS, so that becomes a good option as a unique as well. There's a lot of different weapons you can use right here. This is going to be your ideal situation though, and so work on crafting a really, really good late mapping Reaver Sword. We are running jewels in the late mapping and the mid mapping. Our jewels are just strength, int and strength, or all attributes. Increase attack speed with 2-handers, 5% increased life. These are just min rolls on it. These are the ideal jewels that you're going to be looking for. Get what you can. On the late mapping, we do move over to a large cluster jewel setup, and so we have large cluster jewels. These cluster jewels are nothing fancy. This is just 2 good passives on an 8 passive cluster jewel. You could run a tri jewel instead if you're really lucky, and you make a tri added passive, and so that becomes an option as well. Then on our tree, you can see we do come all the way over here. We get our max endurance charges, get more jewel slots over here. We are running precise technique, so make sure that your accuracy is always over your life total, which shouldn't be that hard. Accuracy is really strong for us because we are running these ascendancies on our jug. So unstoppable is what we're going to start with. So early on, we're going to pick up unstoppable in our first lab because it's just really good quality of life for getting through the map. In mid mapping, we're going to have undeniable because we want that increased attack speed per accuracy and gaining accuracy equal to twice your strength. And then late mapping, we are going to come over here to unflinching and unrelenting for the additional defenses that those do give us on the character. Now that is everything from the leveling process to early mapping to mid mapping to late mapping and gearing. Again, don't underestimate the value of these endurance charges. Endurance charges are the primary way that we're going to be staying alive in this new season. Don't forget the life on hit anoint. That is very, very important for us here. And then now we're going to talk about like some in-game on multi-strike. We have this node Fatal Flourish right here, which is the final repeat of attack skills. Deals 60% more damage. With Awakened Multi-Strike on our character. So if we run, instead of Volatility, we run Awakened Multi-Strike. And then we do Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame Jewels here. And those Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame Jewels give us Fatal Flourish. Then we guarantee that every attack has 4 repeats. And those 4 repeats end with our final attack being a Fatal Flourish. Also, our final attack being a Magma Balls. We massively change this multiplier over here. I'm not going to go into the math on that right now, but I think and it needs to be mathed outside of POB so that we can have the correct modifier in here. But I think in game, that is such a huge multiplier to do 60% more on our 5th attack every time. That turns the 1000%. We do 1 in 20 quality, by the way. Sorry. That turns the 1000% more damage into 6000% more damage on that 5th repeat. So I think that's where we start seeing some absolutely tremendous numbers here. But that's Awakened Multi-Strike, that's Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame Jewels, and that's a future. That's not a League start build here. So we're just kind of touching on that because I think that's where this build goes and really starts dropping some tremendous damage. If you have any questions, come over to Twitch, hit me up. I always appreciate it, and I enjoy helping people. And so come by, ask your questions. We'll figure it out. Whenever the game is live and we're rolling, I'll be streaming probably 24 to 32 hours the first day, 18 plus hours the second day. And so you're welcome to swing by and ask questions then as well. If I'm League starting Lightning Slayer and not League starting this, we'll still have an idea of what it looks like, but I will be making both characters early on in the League so that we can play both of them side by side. Other than that, thank you very much. Y'all have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Peace.